Coach Tony. I love that. All right, folks, we're back, and we are joined this week on the show by award-winning sports columnist for the Baltimore Sun, Kevin Cowherd, who just collaborated with Cal Ripken Jr. on a book called Hothead. It is the first in a three-book series through Disney Books. It is great. You got to get your hands on it. It's called Hothead. Before we get back to some emails here, Kevin, we're going to take some calls here and see what some of these folks have to say about sportsmanship in America. In fact, we're going to go to Frank, who is calling in. Frank, you're on Let Them Play.
Hey, Coach Tony, how are you?
I'm doing great. You're here with me and Kevin.
Good. I think the problem with sportsmanship went out the window when stepping between the lines or getting on the court became more about showcasing your own personality or showcasing your own talents as opposed to just following the rules that have been played for the last 100 years. You see these kids trying to promote themselves, trying to say, look at me, look what I just did, regardless of who's on the other team or who I just offended. Like, you know, like you just said, the cojones thing going around the bases. Who I could care less who I just offended. Look at me. Look what I just did.
Kevin, what do you think?
Well, I think he's 100% right. You know, it touches on something, Tony, that you brought up earlier when you mentioned that, hey, when you were a kid, you know, you liked to show off and everything. You know, there's always been in sports guys who stood out and showed off. And you can go back to Babe Ruth on this. You can go back to Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays. These guys were exceptional athletes. They knew it, and they made sure everybody else knew it. But what they didn't do was disrespect the opponent. And that's the thing that has changed so much now. It's not just about glorifying yourself anymore with a lot of athletes. It's also putting the other guy down, putting the other team down, letting the other team know that they're not worthy. And I think that's where things have really changed dramatically. Again, there's always been guys who showed off, who strutted, who swaggered. But I never sensed until recently that it was all about putting the other guy down too. And I think that's really, really unfortunate.
And is it just me, or is there literally just no more humility? I mean, the first time I see a kid who truly excels and has humility, I'm just going to drop dead on the spot. And again, you know, timely wise, one of my true heroes in life really is Cal Ripken Jr. And I remember, and Kevin, hope you remember this. I'm sure Frank remembers this. Do you remember the last All-Star game Cal Ripken played?
Yep.
Do you remember what A-Rod did?
Yes.
A-Rod literally had to pick up Cal Ripken to move him to shortstop because he knew it was his last game. And yep. Cal Ripken had this aw shucks grin on his face. So regardless of what a jerk he was as a kid, that was just an amazing moment. And then, as if anyone questions whether or not there's a God, what happens? Cal Ripken hits a home run. And he could have taken an hour and a half to go around those bases, and he would have deserved it given his career. Instead, he did it the way he played his entire career, was he just put his head down, had those big blue eyes and that amazing smile, and he just basically said to the whole world, here's why I'm one of the greatest heroes in the modern-day era. You just don't see that. You don't see the kids who just go to work and do their thing anymore. Why is that happening?
You know, I don't think anybody knows. You know, I don't think anybody can really pinpoint why that's not happening. I mean, I can tell you, Tony and Frank, that in the case of Cal Ripken Jr., he played the game the way he was taught by his dad. His dad was Cal Ripken Sr., longtime third base coach for the Baltimore Orioles, a longtime minor league coach in the Orioles system, and also a manager in the Orioles system. And he was an old-school guy who believed you never showed up the opponent. That was number one. Okay, so no matter what Cal Ripken did, great play at shortstop, turned a great double play, 3-run homer to win the game, it didn't matter. Cal was always going to play the game the right way. He was never going to show up the opponent. And plus, Tony, I mean, you hit on it. You use the word humility. That's what Cal was all about. But I think that was really ingrained in him by his dad. And, you know, you don't get that. So many of these young players these days, they just don't get that kind of that kind of lesson, that kind of role model from their parents. And
hang on a second, Kevin, because I got to ask you this one. You may or may not have met Cal's little brother Billy.
Oh, yes.
All right. So I got to ask, because Billy Ripken is world famous for something that a lot of people don't even know about. Do you know what I'm talking about, Kevin?
I know exactly what you're
All right. So same great dad. And again, Cal Ripken Sr., another great hero of mine because he raised an amazing couple of kids. But for those of you who don't know, Frank, do you know what I'm talking about?
I really don't.
All right, so listen to this. Cal Ripken, and Kevin's laughing because he knows what I'm going to say. I can't say it on the air, but I'll allude to it. In spring training, you sit there with your bat on your shoulder and you take your picture for your baseball card. Now, Google is going to go off the charts when I get off this the show today. Billy Ripken, without the knowledge of the folks at Topps who make baseball cards, had his bat on his shoulder. If your bat's on your shoulder, all you can see is the bottom of the butt of the bat. Billy, or it's never really been proven it was Billy, it may have been one of his teammates, but Billy has a smile in this picture. On the bottom of his barrel of his bat, the butt of his bat, is written a message to the general public. It starts with an F and it ends with a U. Topps did not catch this, and the baseball card was printed. Had to be. See, Adam's laughing. I don't think he knows it either. So maybe it's a little bit of a little brother syndrome and trying to stand in Cal's shadow. And maybe I just wanted to tell a funny story. But you know, Billy, did he ever own up to this?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. You know, Billy did eventually cop to the whole thing, Tony. But here's the other thing. You know, Billy was never Cal. Okay. Billy was the extrovert, while Cal was more of the introverted guy. But the same thing applied. Billy had a terrific career. He was a terrific fielder for the Baltimore Orioles, had a terrific baseball career, not anywhere near the career that the Hall of Fame career that Cal Ripken Jr. had. But Billy, still, same thing, played with humility, didn't show people up. That, you know, did he have a jokester side to him? Was he a prankster and all that kind of thing? Yeah, but he still played the same way. I mean, I covered both of these guys during their career, and I can tell you, they both played the same way. You never showed up the opponent. It was that simple.
Well, that's good to hear because, like I said, I didn't follow. You know, listen, I have friends who know Billy Ripken, and they said he's a great guy. And like I said, I was more Billy Ripken than I ever was Cal Ripken. And, you know, if I could go back and change it, I would. So I respect Billy Ripken, you know, just for the little brother syndrome. I'm the youngest of four, and I know what it can be like. But again, and standing in that shadow can never be easy. Hey, Frank, I want to thank you for the call, as always. There are a couple of emails that came in, Kevin, that I wanted to still get to because they bring up some very good points. I know there are a lot of others, but I'm not going to get to all the emails. And by the way, the phone lines are still open at 914-693-5700. I'm kind of hogging the airwaves here with Kevin because I'm enjoying myself. But we got an email from Charles in Ottawa. And as you can imagine, Charles in Ottawa is going to tell a hockey story. So he says, hey, Coach Tony, in one incident during an Atom, and I mean ATOM, Atom playoff game, which I assume that means they're very young kids, a supervisor approached a woman in the stands who was screaming insults at two 15-year-old officials. The supervisor identified himself as a supervisor and asked the woman to, quote, tone down her comments. Her response was to pour more abuse on the supervisor and later more abuse on another parent who tried to intervene. This kind of stuff just never would have happened when I was a kid. How do you account for behavior like this? Well, Charles, if you listen to the show at all, you know I am not a big fan of hockey at all. I think there is just so much wrong with it. I don't even know where to begin. And that makes me a little biased on this topic. So before I go into my rant, which I always do when we talk about hockey, I got to ask Kevin first before I, muddy up the water. Kevin, what do you make of this with the specifics to hockey and just in general? You got a mom berating two 15-year-old officials at a hockey game. I mean, first of all, are you a hockey fan?
I'm not, Tony, but let me just say this. First of all, you see this kind of behavior in all sports, okay? So, in this venue, it's hockey. I've seen the exact same thing in basketball. I've seen the exact same thing in baseball. More in basketball because you tend to have officials, you'll have these games where you have 15-year-old kids reffing, and it's a different deal. But you see that all the time. I mean, look, there's no other way to say it. It's despicable behavior. There's no question about it. I think the supervisor was right to try to step in and tell this mom, I assume she was a mom, to tone it down. But, you get that in all sports. By no means is that limited to hockey.
Well, I can certainly agree with that. I just got to tell you that it's very rare. Oh, but you know what? Before I start tearing apart hockey, I think it's important to give Charles a little bit of information here. And again, Charles, I hope you're listening in. I don't know if this affects you, Charles, in Ottawa, but I do know that in Calgary, the city's hockey association now requires at least one parent from every registered hockey family to take an online course that promotes sportsmanship. And it has been reported that almost 12,000 parents have completed this one-hour course before this past season began. The way it worked was Hockey Calgary, which is the association, did not allow a player back on the ice until a parent completed this program, which is called Respect in Sport. Now, in your neck of the woods in Ottawa, I will say that the Women's Hockey Referees Association has said that the league issued a warning to parents earlier this year after behavior in the stands became an issue. And now, apparently, referees have been instructed to ask abusive parents to leave and not to drop the puck again until they have departed. Now, between you and me, Kevin, and you tell me if you feel any different about this, I don't know if that's going to make a dent, because the stories that I would love, someone emailed me one week and said, why do you always talk about bad stuff happening in hockey? Well, you know why? Because I've never read a story about something really heartwarming and endearing going on in youth hockey. And the reason is, and here's where I start my rant. My voice is going up. If you have a kid who's aspiring to go be in the NHL, what's the inherent flaw in that? The NHL, the only reason people watch it is the same reason people watch NASCAR. So they're hoping something's going to crash. In NASCAR, they want to see cars crash. In hockey, they want to see two idiots fight each other. And it's the only non-combat sport where you are allowed to fight. And then 5 minutes later, you and I, Kevin, we may have just punched the snot out of each other. 5 minutes later, we're back on the ice as if nothing ever happened. Am I the only idiot who thinks there's something just inherently flawed with the message that we're sending to young kids, and especially when they got to get up at 5 in the... No wonder the parents are irate. You got a 6-year-old kid who plays hockey? You're playing games at 3 in the morning, an hour and a half away from your house. There's just something really broken here, Kevin, and I can't fix it. You got any ideas?
Well, I don't. I mean, look, at the whole fighting culture in hockey is something I never understood. But again, Tony, I'm not a hockey guy. I've seen it in action. I don't understand it. I don't understand why the sport can't be cleaned up. People that have played hockey for 1,000 years say, hey, there has to be this outlet because, if you don't let these guys fight, they're going to start whacking each other, with their sticks, and far worse things are going to happen. Let them punch themselves out for a minute or two and have the referees jump in and it's all over. I don't understand that. But getting back to that hockey scenario that was detailed, I think it was a call or there was an email that you read. Getting back to that, look, if you have young referees, you better have plenty of supervision in that building for the rest of the game. So you better have 2 strong coaches in there for the opposing teams, and you better have some other adults in there with strong supervision. Because if you're relying on teenage kids to referee these games, and again, this cuts across all sports, you've got to give them some support. And if you don't do that, you're just asking for trouble, because you're going to get a mom like that going nuts, and you're going to need some strong authority figures there to calm that situation down. And again, that goes through all sports. Getting back to what you're saying, the hockey culture, Tony, I don't understand it either, but I didn't play the game as a kid, and maybe that's part of the reason that I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, you brought up a great point when you talk about supervision, and there are going to be levels of supervision, because we've all read about the ref or the umpire or the coach that gets followed to their car. What happens when someone decides to follow a 15-year-old kid? I mean, we all know about the hockey dad who killed the other dad because of how a scrimmage was being run. Yep. And I don't know if you heard the follow-up story to this, Kevin, but that guy's son, this guy was released from prison finally in August. And just a month ago, his son was arrested for a battery, an assault, breaking and entering, and it was a premeditated thing. At some point, do we just, go for some overall youth hockey genocide and start with a clean slate? I mean, I don't know how to solve this, but it seems like no one's trying to solve it either.
Well, I'll tell you something. If I can switch to a different sport in a minute, we had
Kevin, can you hang on to that thought for a second? Because we're late for a break, and we're going to have to go to a break, and I want your thoughts. When we come back, we'll take more of your calls at 914-693-5700. We'll get to some more of your emails. But before we go to break, folks, I just want to give you a quick reminder. Team New York Baseball, aside from being one of the top 5 programs in the entire country, is a nonprofit organization, and we are still looking to help underprivileged kids who can make their lives better by playing baseball. I urge you, please, please, please go to Team NY Baseball, www.teamnybaseball.org, and give what you can so we can give some more opportunities to these kids. We are finalizing our rosters, and there are still a couple of kids that really could benefit from this amazing opportunity. Again, we're a nonprofit, and for some of these kids, it's going to change their lives. Don't forget the www, because you have to use that. It's www.teamnybaseball.org, and please contact us for more information about how you can give and really help change the life of a young kid. Stick around, folks. We're going to be right back.